Hello, and welcome to this morning's session, State of Indiana K-12 Education. My name is Dr. Shenia Suggs, Assistant Superintendent for the MSD of Wayne Township, and I'm so excited to tell you a little more about our presenter today. But just a quick reminder that at the end of this session, you will be redirected to the session survey. Please complete the session survey, and your answers will help with planning for next year's conference. Moderator, please help me welcome Dr. Katie Jenner. Before she comes to us, I'd like to share some information about her journey. Katie Jenner was appointed as Indiana's first Secretary of Education by Governor Eric J. Holcomb, effective January 11th, 2021. Prior to her appointment, Dr. Jenner served as Senior Education Advisor to Governor Holcomb, where she provided guidance on statewide policy and initiatives for preschool, K-12, and higher education. Dr. Jenner began her career in K-12 public education as a career and technical education teacher in Kentucky. After moving to Indiana, she held various administrator roles, including Assistant Superintendent for Madison Consolidated Schools. Dr. Jenner later served as the Vice President of K-12 Initiatives and Statewide Partnerships for Ivy Tech Community College, where she led statewide strategies and formed partnerships between K-12 education, career centers, and Ivy Tech. Dr. Jenner earned a bachelor's degree in business from Transylvania University in Kentucky, a master's degree in business education from the University of Kentucky, an MBA through a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship at Indiana State University, and a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Kentucky. Dr. Jenner is committed to ensuring all students are prepared for the competitive realities of our 21st century economy. She and her Indiana Department of Education team will build capacity, spark innovation, and forge partnerships at all levels of Indiana's PK-12 education system to support educators and empower families. Without further ado, I bring to you Dr. Jenner.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much, Dr. Suggs, for the kind introduction. I am very grateful for the opportunity to join you today to talk through and really level set some of the challenges and the opportunities that exist today in our K-12 or pre-K-12 education space. I also, before beginning, want to take an opportunity, and I think she's probably on, I hope she is, but to recognize Tanya Bell McKenzie, President and CEO of Indiana Black Expo. I had the opportunity to meet Tanya about a month ago, and we absolutely share the same passion around the momentum in Indiana to really open doors for all students to have access to pathways that set them up for whether it's enrollment, employment, or enlistment. But I just was absolutely energized by that conversation we had a month ago, and I know we have more to come, Tanya. So thank you too for your leadership. At this time, what I'd like to do is share my screen. So give me a quick second. Are you able to see the Indiana University Education Conference screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect, perfect, thank you. So the presentation I've prepared for you today will begin with an emphasis on our why our work in the K-12 space matters, not just for today, but for a student's entire lifelong trajectory. I've also asked our resident expert in Indiana our Chief Academic Officer at the department to provide a high-level walkthrough of our data that's recently hot off the press on student learning, including English language arts and math. She is excellent on this topic, and just want you all to have the most recent updated data. We'll also dig into how DOE is focusing in the future to make sure you, our educators, our schools have the support necessary to do the best we can for all students. We'll dig into some strategic priorities, including throughout, as I mentioned, the conversation with Tanya. You're going to hear a lot today about our opportunity with student pathways and the momentum that we're really hearing from people across Indiana, and the opportunities we have there. And then finally, we say this frequently. You've probably heard me say this already over the past few months, but collaboration and partnership, they are absolutely key if we really want to maximize our impact for kids in Indiana. So let's begin by starting with our why, and why our work in the K-12 space is so important. To answer this question, we must first look at who we serve. At the DOE, our role is to support schools and educators in meeting every child where they are and ensuring they have access to the quality education needed to succeed. This includes all approximately 1.1 million Hoosier students attending more than 2,100 schools across all school types. We know, that by looking at the data, the population we serve is changing. And Commissioner Lubbers, who's the commissioner for the Indiana Higher Education, I know she spoke earlier this week, and likely you'll hear some of our similar points echoed. But in the recent equity report that was just released, I believe this week, we can see that, in fact, over the past 10 years, Indiana's graduating high school students are becoming more diverse and increasingly low income. And now that we have identified who we served, I think we must do a quick level set, specifically looking at the external factors impacting our education space today. First, the rapidly changing and diverse global economy is putting increased pressure on Indiana's K-12 education system. The speed of change has also accelerated and is pushing our system to continuously adapt and meet the needs of students, families, educators, and employers. And meanwhile, the pervasive advances in technology, which I know we are all feeling, are absolutely part of the transformational change in terms of the skills and knowledge needed for our students to develop to be prepared for the best lifelong trajectory. Then when you factor in the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I mentioned Dr. Flores is here, who will get into some of that data, the COVID-19 impact, we really start to get a sense of the pressure, or really what I like to refer to, the opportunity that we have in K-12 education to really, really impact people. As we face some of the same forces as the rest of the country, our opportunity is to lead, and most importantly, to lift all of our citizens to better lives through education. And some of this may have again been discussed or echoed by Commissioner Lubbers earlier this week. And so just to reiterate and level set, this chart includes data recently discussed by Indiana leaders in a governor's workforce cabinet meeting. You can see over time, the educational demand for jobs is changing. Fewer jobs require less than a high school diploma, while more require a post-secondary credential. And for reference, again, to make sure the semantics is the same, for reference, a post-secondary credential can include an industry recognized certificate or certification, a certificate of completion of an apprenticeship, a license recognized by state or federal government, or of course, a a one-year certificate, associate degree, or bachelor degree. Whether a student earns an industry certification or a bachelor's degree, expanding one's skills beyond a high school diploma is absolutely critical to meeting the needs ahead for our state. But even bigger than that, as an educator, you know, we do this work for kids. We do this work for our students. We know the impact of educational attainment on a person, on an individual. It can lead to, and there's all sorts of data out there if you ever have an interest in studying this further, but you know, a person's educational attainment really does matter. It can lead to healthier life, more sustainable income, greater job security. And what we're seeing in Indiana is incredibly exciting because, and I'm sure there are some even listening in today, we are seeing high schools across Indiana who are taking intentional dual credit, sometimes coupled with dual enrollment courses, and students are leaving with these intentional post-secondary credentials and industry certifications while they are in high school. And that's something that no one can ever take away from a student. And so the fact that it's happening in high school while they have wraparound services is really incredible. I know there's a lot of data on this slide. I am a self-proclaimed data nerd. I love digging in. But so follow me as I walk through this. This is actually 2019 data, and the Department of Ed worked across multiple state agencies to get these data points and so that we could tell this story. 79% of 2019 high school graduates in Indiana said that they intended to continue their education. Again, advance their educational attainment. That self-reported data, which is reported to the department and right before graduation. By August of that same year, only 59% of Hoosiers students who actually made it to higher learning. So right out of the gate, we lost about 20% of that cohort within a couple, 3 months of graduation. And we could together make all sorts of assumptions as to why that might happen, right? I mean, is there a bridge opportunity to help get them there to the next step? Was their graduation plan robust enough that they knew the possibilities ahead? Like many of us have experienced as educators, did a student, when they graduated, when the wraparound services and support left, you know, and did life just hit them? But regardless of what that is or might be, I think the opportunity in reviewing this data is how might we together positively impact this? So again, 59% of Hoosier students actually entered August of, or that following year, higher learning after graduation. This is state data that Commissioner Lubbers probably shared. 44% of students who start in Indiana full-time finish on time. This number does include out-of-state students. So when we just look at Indiana students, it's actually about 36% of students who start on time, finish on time. And by the way, and those of you who are math teachers on this, it's actually 36% approximately of that 59% who started, which, and again, statistically, we gave this a bit of a buffer cushion here. So that leaves approximately 25% of a graduating high school cohort. So our graduating seniors, about 25% after 4 years, complete any sort of credential. And that's approximately 33% of a graduating cohort after 6 years. And I want to share that story because I think the opportunity ahead, and this is one of the conversations this was a big conversation that Tanya and I had that day about a month ago, because we do have spots across the state high schools across the state in a variety of different areas, serving a variety of different students who are really changing the game for students, changing the life trajectory for students while in high school. And I'll dig into that a little bit more. But let's first take a look at this slide, which I think you probably did see again with Commissioner Levers. 59% of Indiana high school grads go straight to college. We talked about that. Commission's equity report that was just released this week. One of the points I did want to make sure we draw attention to is very specifically our Black students and the opportunity to impact our Black students, our Hispanic Latino students, our students who we absolutely in that high school space could positively impact if we can begin some of this education, strategically provide access a bit earlier while in high school. Here are the bachelor degree seekers, and I'm going to keep moving because I do think you saw that data earlier in the week. But I want to do a quick level set, and this is, by the way, this is Parke County, Indiana. It's a rural county in Indiana, but wanted to provide this example because they have a high school in their district really doing some good work for kids. So you see, if you follow this data, follow it with me. When we look at just the level set at Parke County's attainment rate as a county, they're at about 24% have education beyond high school, or an associate's degree, I should say. About 34% have credentials beyond high school. When we look again at that class of 2019 data, 76% of students said that when they graduated, they were going to continue their education. So very similar to state average. 67% enrolled in August, right after graduation. That's a bit above our state average. But after 4 years, only 18% had completed a certificate or higher. After 6 years, 40%. If you look at that red arrow across and look at the class of 2021, they're systematically, again, making dual credit, dual enrollment intentional so that kids have the opportunity for educational attainment beyond high school while in high school and increasing some of that experiential learning. So while at Parke Heritage High School, a student can earn a high school diploma and a post-secondary credential. So that is right now, just with the Indiana College Corps alone, I'm not even including the CTE certificates, they have 30% of their high school graduating class leaving with a credential beyond high school. And going back to the conversation with Tanya, I think the question that we have as educational leaders is how might we allow every child in Indiana to have that opportunity? And we know that really in order to maximize a student's success, to allow them these opportunities at the high school to maximize their trajectory, it involves backwards designing into our elementary and middle grade space, which are absolutely critical time periods, grade levels for a child. I mean, that is when the knowledge and the skill development is happening actively. And that knowledge and skill development that we have in our elementary and middle grade classrooms really lead into the pathways and opportunities that we can produce in Indiana for kids and that we're seeing again in schools across Indiana in different areas. I said this, but let me reemphasize it one more time. Every grade level counts when it comes to the life of a child. Being literate by third grade, we know this data as educators. If a student is not literate by the third grade, their future looks very different in terms of opportunity. It is imperative that all students are literate by third grade. An increased immersion in STEM education. I often, hear what people speak about what they're doing in their school, and some of the really interesting work in a conversation I had not too long ago was with someone who said, and some of you probably repeat the same thing at different times, but if we don't show a student, help some of our students see what is possible, see what careers are in science beyond a doctor and a nurse, see what careers are in technology. Yes, it's computer science. Yes, it's information technology. But if not for the work of educators to explore some of these opportunities, many of our students just won't know. And so really we have a important opportunity to make sure they do understand what's possible. So in addition to knowledge, it's also the skill development. And the skills is something we talk about at different times. We know that it's important. We do in Indiana. In addition to Indiana academic standards, we also have Indiana's employability skills standards. A few examples include perseverance, time management, and organization. But again, all of this skill development is on a continuum to continue to improve the opportunities for that child as they move forward. So what I'd like to do right now, I've kind of level set a bit on the opportunity with the pathways. And what I'd like to do now is again, dig a bit more into the student learning and what we know about the most recent data that's hot off the press and the COVID-19 impact. Before we start looking at this data, there are 3 points that I want to make very clear, and I shared this yesterday at the State Board of Ed meeting. I've also shared it with several of our stakeholder groups. Firstly, the data that we're about to look at should not be an indictment, must not be an indictment on anyone, on any school, on any educator. COVID-19 was a global pandemic that impacted all of us. So now we step on the scale or look in the mirror and we see, here's where we are, here's our new baseline, and here's where we go from here. We simply do not have time to admire the problem. We must focus on the solutions ahead for kids. Secondly, and Dr. Flores will hit on this, these are some of the data that we'll see. These are problems that we cannot fix overnight. And I mentioned to you early on that schools can't do this alone. It's going to take partners. It's going to take everyone coming together. And again, we're starting to see that, certainly that synergy around Indiana and some of our communities. But these are problems that likely have multi-year steps, and our gas pedal has to be down in order to overcome some of the data that we're going to see today. Thirdly, while student learning was impacted across the board as a result of the pandemic, our most at-risk students, including our racially and ethnically diverse students, our low-income students, our special ed students, our English language learner students, had persistent learning and educational attainment gaps even prior to the global pandemic. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. You know this too. Our goal must be to maximize the opportunities for all student success with a keen focus on our most at-risk populations. So at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Flores to dig in a bit on what we have learned. And I should say, she's just going to slide over in the chair that I'm in. You may know this, we partnered with the National Center for Assessment. So some of the data that Dr. Flores is going to present is straight from the National Center for Assessment as well. So without further ado, Charity, can you hop in and share a little more about our academic?
Good morning. I do want to provide a little bit of context as we reflect on the data in a few moments. First, we had great participation from our schools. All of our educators really stepped up to promote the value in participating in the assessment so that we can better understand our academic impact. Yesterday, it was shared by our national expert that we have one of the leading data sets to better understand where our students are and better support them long term. I also want to note there are comparisons being made with 2019 proficiency, and we need to be very cautious in doing so because proficiency comparisons really just highlight students that moved from being proficient to not proficient as we reflect on 2021. And so this academic impact analysis that I'm going to share helps us understand the full distribution or the full continuum of student performance. We are seeing significant and widespread impact as we compare our academic performance. And as mentioned, this will require a multi-year, sustained, intentional effort related to recovery. This first slide outlining our data highlights the proficiency related to English language arts. And statewide, you will observe that we had about 41% of students defined as proficient. This is a change of about 8% in total for English language arts. And again, I will note caution as we dig into the academic impact, that will be a more representative measure. And to compare this then with mathematics performance, statewide, we saw an overall proficiency percentage of around 37%. Again, that is a total change in proficiency of about 11%. And so we will transition quickly then into how this proficiency compares to academic impact. In 2021, there was legislation that charged the department to conduct a learning loss study as we reflect upon the most recent school year and transition into the 21-22 school year. Alongside of that effort, we also received additional funding, which allows for 5% of awarded grant funds to be distributed and targeted to efforts to address learning loss. We recently have reframed that terminology to be very intentional about our efforts. And so when you see learning loss or academic impact that I will share today, those terms are meant to be synonymous for your interpretation. And again, we partnered with the National Center for Assessment, who has historically provided great support to the department for accountability and growth calculations to conduct this research effort on behalf of the department. There are two phases associated with our study. Phase one was a review of pandemic-related impact. Again, this is taking a look in the mirror of the impact for the 2020-2021 school year. And we are at the point very soon where we will be pivoting into phase two. This is a long-term continued effort for the department as we try to look ahead for our recovery efforts. The purpose of this study is really focused on three key areas. Who, in terms of which students were potentially impacted by the pandemic, what, in what ways for the content that is presented to students, what content areas were impacted, and the third question is how much, to what degree were students impacted? And again, we think it's incredibly valuable at this point in time to really be forward-looking, be proactive active in terms of student support, while the impact shows us the degree to which students may have been compromised as a result of the impact. We really want to be looking forward at this point of time, really providing long-term solutions. So in phase one, there are two questions that we reviewed. To what extent did the disruptions in educational programming due to COVID-19 impact student academic performance and learning outcomes? And the second question is, what is the anticipated recovery time associated with the identified academic impact? And when we think about recovery time, and I will emphasize this a couple points this morning, it is critical that we think about not simply returning to our normal learning conditions. Recovery time requires additional supplemental intentional support for students. So this is above and beyond what would have been a typical learning environment. We had 3 data sources that we were able to kind of collaborate and collate in order to draw some of these conclusions. First, the ILEARN assessment that was available again in all grades 3 through 8 for both English language arts and mathematics. Our second data source is WIDA Access, and if you're not familiar with this assessment, it is used to determine English language proficiency for students to better understand their level of fluency in English. This assessment was given in school year 2020, just prior to the pandemic, so we actually have longitudinal data for this population. And then we were able to triangulate our 2 data sets with a third, which is typically given to students as a formative measure, which is NWEA. So we had, again, a very robust data set in order to draw our conclusions for our study. Academic impact is a measurement of whether student growth was any faster or slower than pre-pandemic student growth. So again, in Indiana, we have used a student growth measure for some time, and it is applied to all students. And so this, again, allows us greater insight than simply using proficiency rates. The recovery time, as I noted, this is a measurement to define the potential duration of recovery with supplemental support being provided to students. This is not meant to ultimately achieve proficiency. Proficiency would require even a longer term effort. Recovery time is intended to characterize returning to pre-pandemic performance. We will highlight 3 designations this morning in terms of significance. When we see red in the charts that will be shared momentarily, that indicates that the academic impact for students in those student groups is significant. The recovery time will exceed 1 full year of returning back to school and will require supplemental academic support. Moderate is indicated in orange. That recovery time is up to 1 school year and likely will require supplemental academic support. And then the last color in terms of our indications is blue, and that is representing recovery time that is minimal or with minor deviations from historic performance. So 3 major takeaways as we think about those initial indications: who, what, and how much. How much is to what extent students were impacted academically by the pandemic. The academic impacts were substantial. We observed these indications ranging from moderate to significant. When we started to compare the ILEARN data with other data points, WIDA access, it confirmed that that level of significance was there also for English language learners. Then we also had a few areas where we need to pause and reflect and better understand the level of support being provided to students. We had some areas where we anticipated seeing a higher level of significance than the data actually represented. And so we need to do some further analysis pre-pandemic to understand some of those takeaways. What? In the content areas where students saw impact, mathematics, that was the key area where it was most significant, and that was observed again just when we were looking at proficiency. English language arts showed moderate to significant. Again, in terms of student groups, English language proficiency experienced significant impact. And with the conclusions that we've been able to draw so far, we believe that while we focused on English language arts and mathematics, that other subject areas, it's assumed, likely saw similar impacts as well. In terms of who was impacted, generally we saw academic impacts were of comparable size within the content area and were widespread across grades K through 12. In terms of student groups, again, there was comparable impact by grade and content area, and then we are looking at further areas of disaggregation. English language learners, we know, experience different amounts of impact depending on grade level. And again, those are areas where we are pausing to reflect and potentially doing some additional analysis to better understand the impact. However, as we've been releasing data to corporations and schools, while there is some variability in what was delivered, most corporations and schools experience significant academic impacts. So I'll start first with the overall impact by grade level. And again, this slide aligns to some of our initial data that we shared for proficiency. Our most significant academic impact is in mathematics, with moderate to significant occurring in English language arts. And if you look to the key to the right, again here, recovery time is noted that for significant, it is greater than a year. And again, as we think about how that's defined, that is a year of typical learning environment and supplemental support. Moderate will be at least a year, and again, require supplemental support. In terms of ethnicity, here we see the level of significance remain the same in mathematics, but here by student group, we do start to observe some changes. Black and Hispanic and Asian students had significant academic impact. In terms of those student groups, however, I will note that performance tended to be higher for our Asian students in comparison to Black and Hispanic. So while all of them were significantly impacted, Black and Hispanic students tended to perform at a decreased number originally. And special education students, again, here we want to pause and reflect. We saw moderate, that orange, for special education students. So it shows here on this slide that the impact was not as great for that population, which means that we may need to dig into the types of services being provided to students pre-pandemic. We saw with SES status, again, significance was higher for students of lower socioeconomic status. And again, to summarize, there are really two types of issues that we've seen. Some that are likely a result of the pandemic, and some that may have occurred pre-pandemic. We saw that the academic impact is significant in mathematics across all grades. In ELA, while it's not as severe as mathematics, it is still considerable across all grades. And this impact likely extends to other content areas. The rates of learning for recovery are going to be unprecedented and must be sustained long-term. And for those areas where I highlighted we need to pause and reflect, English language learners, we saw that there was no decline during the pandemic, so we need some additional reflection in that area. Our lowest achievers showed very little decline during the pandemic. So again, additional support, additional analysis may be needed to support them more extensively going forward. And I'm going to transition back to Dr. Jenner.
And Dr. Flores, one thing that you did mention and on the last slide is that English language learners, and I know you were hurrying because I gave you a 3-minute, we have more, but you mentioned that English language learners showed no decline during the pandemic. And just to clarify, that was only at the high school. We did see significant decline again in our elementary grades. So moving ahead, and I know we have a hard stop at 9, we want to make sure our Department of Education is providing the support that our educators in schools need. We know that the real change happens at the local level. That's where the impact occurs, and we certainly want to be a support. Per statute, we're a compliance monitoring agency. Our role is data collection, distribution of funds, transparency of showcasing data to the public. We also have heard from you over the past 6 months, and what we have heard is, again, the momentum and opportunity that we have in Indiana to just positively impact all kids, whether it's developing the fundamentals, the student learning that Dr. Flores just mentioned, leading into the pathways, but a lot of opportunity. And so we want to make sure our capacity at the department, that we're working across agencies with the commission, with early learning, with other agencies, and then also that you have that support at the local level, again, where the change happens. Over the course of the 6 months of listening, 3 themes have most certainly emerged. Firstly, student learning and opportunity, and that means all students. Students are our North Star. That is why we are in this profession. Second pillar, our educator talent, quality, and value. And we're going to dig into each of these a little bit more. System alignment and capacity is our third pillar. So let's dig into each of these pillars a bit more. I shared this first group of strategies in the weekly newsletter on Friday, so you can find them there. We'll also share this presentation with you, make it available after. But we heard from you, again, a lot of opportunity, whether it's increasing access in our early learning so that our most at-risk students most certainly have access to early learning opportunities, to the educational fundamentals, which we've talked about, to allow the experiential learning and the pathways opportunities for students. We're also working to rebuild, or actually it's not a rebuild, it's a development of a dashboard, a data dashboard for our schools to show, again, some additional indicators that really matter, lead and lag data points for a student, for schools, for a community. The second pillar, educator talent, quality, and value, is focused on our workforce, our educator pipeline. We know we have an opportunity to elevate the mission and value of the work that we lead. The work that you do, the work that we do together is so critical for the lives of our children. And we value you and we must celebrate it. We also must recruit more of Indiana's best and brightest to serve in our classrooms and in leadership roles, including racially and ethnically diverse candidates, of which we're very focused on. Let's keep moving for the sake of time to Pillar 3, system alignment and capacity. Our third pillar, again, is about supporting educators, stakeholders at all levels, removing unnecessary barriers, driving the best return on investment for our fiscal resources, and support and really focusing. You've heard me say it already. We don't have time to admire the problem. We have to focus on solutions forward. Digging a little bit more into strengthening our educator pipeline. One example that I would like to highlight in our team is we are quick to stand with organizations, institutions, people, schools that are communities that are driving towards solutions. So Marion University President Dan Elsner reached out not too long ago and said, hey, I have an idea. I have Ivy Tech on board. I also am going to integrate K-12 schools. And Commissioner Lovers and I joined the meeting, and we were pumped about this. So I do want to share this with you. We talked earlier about pathways. So the vision with this educator pipeline partnership, it's almost like the Cadillac of a grow your own model. Ivy Tech will provide that in that junior and senior year of high school for a child, the opportunity to earn that 1 year, first year of college, that first year of post-secondary credential. Many of these classes are already offered in the form of dual credit in our schools. Again, we must ensure access is there for all students. So Ivy Tech would offer that junior or senior year. When a student graduates, they would have that 1 year that could immediately transfer to Ivy Tech, where an associate's degree could be earned, and then to Marion University. Or once the student graduates from high school, they could go straight to Marion University to complete their bachelor's and master's in 4 years for a $45,000 cost that doesn't even include the federal scholarship opportunities. So really excited about this. Also, and the biggest, if you hear from Dr. Turner, the Dean of Marion University, we are most excited that the partnership goal is that 50% of participants are students of color. So again, really, Ivy Tech, Marion, and these K-12 schools are leaning in to not admire the problem, but focus on the solution. They're starting at targeting, it's a pilot to start with. They're starting targeting, I believe it's 5 communities, Evansville, Lake County, South Bend, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, I think are the 5, but really excited to hear what's possible with this, and appreciate certainly their partnership and leaning in to this goal. Collaboration is key. You've heard us say partnership multiple times today. When I was an educator in Jefferson County, Indiana, we experienced the silos of K-12 post-secondary employer and local government. And we also experienced the opportunity when the synergy occurred, when everyone came together to the table for the purpose of our greatest asset, which is our kids in our classroom today. We're seeing this in spots across Indiana, this synergy being developed. And we are here to celebrate that. We are here to support that. And then we're also here for the communities who may be struggling still in developing that synergy. We certainly know the value, and we want to be a support. One such synergy that I do want to highlight, and Dr. Flores, again, we talked about the fundamentals. We also talked about this is not just about doing the same thing that we've always done. We have to strategically accelerate learning for kids. So one such partnership with Marion County Schools of all school types, the United Way of Central Indiana, and the Mind Trust, they have come together to focus on some of the highest need neighborhoods in Marion County for a 5-week learning experience. And we highlight that, we lift that up to celebrate the work that they're doing, and then to also point to there are others in our state who are doing similar partnerships many actually across the state, and we are ready to stand with you, highlight those, and do everything we can to partner for kids. Another initiative I do want to mention, this was an initiative that I will tell you, it shocked me about how many students signed up. It was very exciting. We talked about the value of post-secondary credentials and industry certifications for kids. So coming in, we asked Ivy Tech and Vincennes, we meaning DOE and CHE, asked Ivy Tech and Vincennes, run the numbers. How many students do we have who are within 6 to 9 credits, which equates to like 2 or 3 courses from completing a credential? Again, something no one can ever take away. It's increased educational attainment for that person. And I think the numbers were between 3,500 and 4,000 students. So about a month to a month and a half before school was out, we said, you know what, let's strategically use some of this ESSER money, and let's focus on students to give them an opportunity to complete a credential. We had in that month and a half of time, 1,700 Indiana seniors sign up, representing more than 270 Indiana high schools. And the value of that, you can see the credit hour value, around 10,000 credit hours, and the tuition and fees savings is immense for these students. And then they will obviously have a leg up going forward. And that's, again, an opportunity we really have as a state to capitalize in the future for all kids. This is a slide I want to share with you because we use this in every single presentation, no matter who we present to, because again, schools cannot do this alone. We have to activate our communities to support these strategic interventions, accelerate the learning, develop locally created pathways, or locally created, I should say, partnership, which includes one topic we have not discussed today that has a lot of momentum is quality work-based learning and apprenticeship. So a lot of opportunity when we break down those silos and work together. I'll end with this because I'm watching my time closely. The first is an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I wholeheartedly believe that we are so much stronger when we're all working together, and improving outcomes for all students is going to require us all to work together. And this leads to the next quote by John Dewey. I'll tell you, I had to read this a couple of times because of the way it was written, but it's powerful. And I want to read it. What the best and wisest parent wants for his own child, that must the community want for all its children. And again, while that quote might be written a little bit differently today in flow, the power of its message is there. And we are eager to stand with you, to join you, to make an impact for all students, not only in the student learning space, in our early learning, elementary, middle, and the experiential learning opportunities with work-based learning and educational attainment, achievement at the high school level. We are ready, our sleeves are rolled up, we're ready to work with you. And again, thank you so much for your time, the opportunity. Thank you again, Dr. Suggs, for the introduction, and certainly Tanya for your partnership in some of this work ahead. All the best to you in the coming school year, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.